you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? No? Any better? Dr. Meeks,
Hello,
nice to see you.
hello, hello. Can you hear me too? You can hear me. Good. Can you?
It is on. Let me bend it in a little. May I just do that? I'm
Sure.
so sorry.
No problem. Is that better? Ah.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I've been visiting with Dr. Catherine Meeks in the Great Hall for a moment and chatting, and we were enjoying that. So sorry, I almost forgot to come and join you. It's lovely to see you all. I'm going to introduce our speaker in a moment, but I wanted to say a couple of bits of housekeeping first. If you are interested in coming to the workshop tomorrow morning, you can still come. We would love it if you would use the leaflet and register, so we know how many people to expect, just because we want to know how many chairs to put out. Also, if you want to, you can use this other QR code to register for tonight, even though you're already here. But if you'd like to make a donation electronically, you can do it using that QR code. And that would be really helpful to us. And also, Dr. Meeks has a new book that's just about to come out, but it is not out yet. And our bookshop is ready and prepared to order copies for everybody that would like them. And if you would like to have Dr. Meeks sign your book, we're going to do a signing on Sunday morning. We're so grateful to have you here the whole weekend. We're going to do a signing on Sunday morning in coffee hour between the two services. And we're going to sign book plates, but we're going to try and make sure that we record exactly who wants the book so we can put the book plates in the right book and get them to you. And if you are not able to be here Sunday morning, but you'd still like that, please email me with your name and the fact that you'd like a book and who you'd like the book signed to, and then I'll share that with Dr. Meeks, and we'll make sure that we get it to you. I am going to ask, please order the book through the church bookshop if you want to do that, rather than getting one off of Amazon. That would be really helpful to us. And did I forget anything? We've got some cookies and refreshments over in the Great Hall afterwards. If you'd like to come and join us, you'd be very welcome. But let me tell you what's going to happen this evening. I'm going to introduce our speaker, who I am so grateful to have with us. And then Dr. Meeks is going to speak to us for a little while. And then I'm going to ask a couple questions, but I want you to be thinking of questions that you might want to ask as well, because there'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions towards the end. Let me find this. Dr. Catherine Meeks is the founding executive director of the Absalom Jones Episcopal Center for Racial Healing. An academic, educator, and spiritual leader, Dr. Meeks has spoken to many and led still more through workshops. As a national leader in racial healing work, Dr. Meeks was named a 2022 Presidential Award Lifetime Achievement honoree. In addition, she was awarded the President Joseph R. Biden Lifetime Achievement Award and the Presidential Volunteer Service Award Medal. She is the author of Living into God's Dream, Dismantling Racism in America, and co-author of Passionate for Justice, Ida B. Wells as a Prophet of Our Times. She characterizes herself as a midwife to the soul of her students and workshop participants. Her most recent book will be released just next month, The Night is Long, but Light Comes in the Morning, Meditations for Racial Healing. Thank you, Dr. Meeks, for being with us, and I invite you to share your thoughts on racial healing and your work with us.
All right, thank you. It's good to be here. And I want to start with a poem by from one of my favorite poets, David White. Some of you may know him. I have been a been companioned by David for the last 20 years of my life in, with his poetry, and actually had a chance to meet him not so long ago, which was a delightful occurrence. But he just has a way of putting things, and I thought this poem would be a good one to kind of frame what I want to talk about tonight, and then tomorrow. I will maybe have another David White poem. I don't know. I just, it depends on what comes to me about from his poetry. But I think that you can't, I think that if you don't know David White, you should get to know him because he just has so much to say about the journey of trying to be well and his own work that he's done toward becoming well, I find to be incredibly helpful. This is from the book called Pilgrim, which is what we all are, and the poem is called Second Life. My uncourageous life doesn't want to go, doesn't want to speak, doesn't want to carry on, wants to make its way through death, wants to assume the strange and dubious honor of not being heard. Does that sound familiar to anybody? My uncourageous life doesn't want to move, doesn't even want to stir, wants to inhabit a difficult form of stillness, to pull everything into the silence where the throat strains but gives no voice. My uncourageous life wants to stop the whole world and keep it stopped, not only for itself, but for everyone and everything it knows, refusing to stir a single inch until given an exact and final destination. This uncourageous second life wants to win some undeserved lottery so that it can finally bestow a just and final reward upon itself. No, this second life never wants to write or speak or cook or set the table or welcome guests or sit up talking with a stranger who might accidentally set us traveling again. This second life doesn't want to leave the door, doesn't want to take any path that works its own sweet way through mountains, doesn't want to follow the beckoning flow of a distant river, nor meet the chance weather where a path takes us from one discovered world to another. This second life just wants to lie down, close its eyes, and tell God it has a headache. But my other life, my first life, the life I admire and I want to follow, looks on and listens with some wonder, and even extends a reassuring hand for the one holding back, knowing there can be no real confrontation without the need to turn away and go back, away from it all, to have things be different and to close our eyes until they are different. No, this hidden life, this first courageous life, seems to speak from silence and in the language of a knowing, beautiful heartbreak. Above all, it seems to know well enough it will have to give back everything received in any form, and even sometimes, as it tells the story of the way ahead, laughs out loud in the knowledge this first life seems sure and steadfast in knowing it will come across the help it needs at every crucial place, and thus continually sharpens my sense of impending revelation. This first courageous life, in fact, has already gone ahead, has nowhere to go except out the door into the clear air of morning, taking me with it. Nothing to do except to breathe while it can. No way to travel but with that familiar pilgrim movement in the body. Nothing to teach except to show me on the long road how we sometimes like to walk alone, open to the silent revelation, and then stop and gather and share everything as dark comes in, telling the story of a day's accidental beauty. And perhaps most intriguingly, and most poignantly and most fearfully of all. And at the very end of the long road it has traveled, it wants to take me to a high place from which to see, with a view looking back on the way we took to get there, so it can have me understand myself as witness and thus bequeath the way ahead, so it can teach me how to invent my own disappearance. So it can lie down at the end and show me, even against my will, how to undo myself, how to surpass myself, how to find a way to die of generosity. Actually, I think we could spend the whole time just on that poem, but you didn't invite me here to talk about David White, so let me get to my work. So, what I want to talk about for a few minutes are some words I think that we need to interrogate as we think about the journey toward wholeness. One of the things I think, I don't know how you see all of this, but I want to say that anything that has to do with racial healing, anything that has to do with healing this country, anything that has to do with healing the mess we've made out of the earth God gave us, has to, anything we do to fix any of that has to do with healing overall. So it's not like there's this healing, that healing, and some other healing. There is healing. You work on getting well and being who God put you on the earth to be. You work on living fully into this first life. That's the pilgrim's journey. And so whatever we have to do to clear away the whatever, the underbrush, the things that separate us and keep us from being able to connect the way we need to, those are the things that we have to get rid of. But when you find yourself doing that around race or gender or class or ableism or whatever, it has the effect of being helpful in other parts of our lives. So getting well is about getting well, and not just you get this little piece over here and it's doing pretty well, and then all this is going to hell in a handbasket. It doesn't work that way. You know, you're either working on getting well or you're not. You know, I often say we're either resistors or we're either complicit. There's nowhere in between. We don't get to, we get to play the middle game about a lot of stuff when it comes to healing and wellness. There's no, you don't get to do that. You work on it, you confront stuff, you interrogate. And I like the word interrogate because it's more than just gently passing by. Interrogation is digging in, really asking hard questions and taking a really good look at what you see and being willing to not try to cover it up in any kind of way. So there's some words. So let me just back up for a second and say, I believe language is critical in the journey for healing. That what we say has power. Our words have power. You know, we can say a lot of things to people, and we say a lot of things without thinking, don't we? We say a lot of offhanded things. We say a lot of things that we think, well, somebody knows exactly what we mean, but they don't know what we mean because we didn't know what we meant. You know, we were just talking. And so I have come to believe that when it comes to race, we need to clean our language up. We need to be a lot more careful. All of us do. And I want to start with how much we talk about love. I'm actually a little tired of us talking about love in terms of race. All we need to do is love each other, people say. Well, I don't know what that means. You know, what does it mean to say all we have to do is love each other when people live in places where they can't get good, clean water, they don't have access to education, they don't have decent grocery stores because they're poor and people of color? What does love have to do with it? What they need is a grocery store or better water. Our native people in Navajo land were struggling with getting water during the pandemic because of lack of facilities for them to get water. They don't need us to be sitting somewhere saying all we need to do is love them. They need us to do something about getting them water. So when I worked on this book of meditations, I really interrogated that word a lot because we say it a lot. You know, I love my cat. I love my daughter. I love my new car. I love my dress. But and I love you. Now, what are all those the same thing? You mean you love me as much as the cat or what? So I took a look at First Corinthians 13 and discovered something about love that I thought, yeah, this is the standard. This there has to be some kind of standard that we people of faith agree upon. When we talk about love, we're talking about something with substance, something that's ready to be sacrificial, something that is calling us to be courageous in ways that we never even thought we could be. You know, to believe, to hope, to care, to let people have an opportunity to be who God put them on the earth to be, and to do everything we can to remove the barriers that make it impossible for some people to be who God put them on the earth to be, and then we blame them because they're not who God put them on the earth to be. And then we say all we have to do is love folks. You see how crazy that is? And how crazy it makes people, and why people don't want to be around us because they think we're weird. You know, we don't know what in the world we're talking about. We talk about love, and then they come and we treat them as if we don't. Well, what kind of love do you pass out here? So I want to encourage us tonight to think about, what do you mean when you say that to somebody, particularly when you say it to somebody that's not already in your family. What does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? To love the stranger, to love the person who has, the immigrant, the person living under the bridge, the person who's different. What does that mean? What does my saying I love them mean? And I'm not here to say what the answer has to be for you, but I'm here to say that the answer has to be put in conversation with 1 Corinthians 13, or with Howard Thurman's idea of the love ethic, that you love people beyond all of their faults and all of their gifts and talents, that you go beyond all of that and you love what you see. And we don't know how to even do that because we're always, it's you love something about somebody. It's all about a whole lot of projection. You know, how somebody makes you feel, or what you know, there's so many layers of disingenuousness between where we are and where we're trying to get. And we don't sit in our rooms and decide to be this way. We've just allowed ourselves as a collective. And I was going to say, before I even started talking about these words, try to think about them beyond just yourself. You know, maybe you're doing pretty well with some of this, but think about collectively, how are we doing? How are we doing with the message of love in our communities, in our churches even, and particularly as it comes to trying to work on building community across lines of racial and ethnic differences? How are we doing with First Corinthians' idea, or Howard Thurman's idea of love, and not some whipped cream with strawberries on top? You know, we could do without that, actually. You can put it on a Valentine card or something, but it doesn't work well when it comes to trying to create space where people can be who they are and have a chance to live into the life that God had in mind when they got sent to the earth. Because everybody got sent here, equally loved by the Creator. And we're the ones that set up the hierarchies and decided some people were better than some other people based on a whole bunch of externals that we made up and messed up the whole plan, and then decided that, well, we'll just fix it by saying, well, we just got to love everybody. Well, the next word is racial reconciliation. I would like to invite you to think about reconciliation being the idea that at one time there was this connection, relationship that people had, and it was broken, and now we're trying to reconnect. But there was no such relationship between black and white people in the United States, nor native people. There were only very bad transactional encounters, which we don't need to restore. Nobody wants to go back to that. Well, there are people who do want to go, but we're not going back to that. I mean, there are some people who would be glad to go back to some of those transactional times, but that's not going to happen in anybody's lifetime because I think we've made too much effort to go somewhere else. So there's nothing to reconcile. And it's funny, if the presiding bishop were here, we'd have a funny conversation because Bishop Michael talks about racial reconciliation, and I say there's nothing to reconcile. Reconciliation between us and God, that's a whole different discussion, and that's a discussion. Every human being has to be reconciled to God. But when we talk about racial reconciliation, that's not what we're talking about. Primarily, we're talking about black and white people getting together. There's nowhere to go to get to back to. So there's only the way ahead. And the way ahead requires healing first. Racial healing, which is why in my work, I never use this terminology, racial reconciliation. We always talk about racial healing. The center is called the Center for Racial Healing on purpose. And people always want to add reconciliation, and I have to constantly correct them because we're not about the business at the center, at the Absalom Jones Center. We are about the business of seeking ways to get well. Everybody, black, white, brown, whoever walks through the door, we've all been wounded by racism in the United States of America. Black, white, brown, whoever. If you live here, you've been wounded by the system that we have put in place, and we all have to work on getting well. And so we talk about healing. And then once there is some healing, perhaps there can be some possibility for us to build relationships as equal beings. We come together as equal human beings and not as slave and master, not as superior and inferior, not as better than and less than, but as equal people seeing the face of God in one another and connecting at that level. That's the vision that I've got for the work and for what we need to be trying to do. The next one is color blindness. And I don't know if you ever say, if you are white and you ever say you don't see color, hopefully you don't. But if you do, please remove that sentence from your vocabulary. And if you don't say it, let me just say a few things that maybe will help you tell whoever might ever use those words that they should remove that from their vocabulary. Because as you sit there and look at me, you know I'm a black woman, And I sit here and look at you, and I can see black and brown, and I see white and African people who look like they're maybe of African descent, and there may be some other groups represented that I'm not noticing, but I see the variety of skin tones that's not lost on me. So if I sat here and said, I'm looking at all of you and I don't see color, I'm lying. It's no other way to talk about it. It's no other uh, explanation because unless I can't see, if I'm looking, if my eyes are closed or if I'm blind or something, then I can't see. But if I can see, I can see color. I think that I've always tried to give people the benefit of the doubt about anything. And I think when people say that, they're trying to say, I see that you're black, but I don't want that to get in the way of trying to get to know you. I think that's what they're trying to say. But they got to find a better set of words. Because telling me you don't see my color makes me think, well, then I don't know who you are because you look like you can see me, but then I'm invisible to you? How is that? And to see my color means to see what it means to be a woman of color in the United States of America. It means that you acknowledge that you're willing to let that be a part of whatever interactions we have with each other, that you're not trying to be dismissive of the history that I might have lived. And maybe I didn't live it, but you're willing to take a chance that I might have, and it's okay with you if I did live it. You're not trying to dismiss it. Otherwise, it's trying to be dismissive. Maybe thinking that you're progressive, but it's not progressive. It's not a statement that is communicated as a progressive statement. Now, it does not mean that you're not a progressive person who's trying to say that in an effort to be that way, but it's communicated. It is taken in as being dismissive. It's being unwilling to deal with the fact that when I get up in the mornings and think about my son's encounters with the police, I have a different set of feelings about all that than somebody who's white. And you're willing to be connected to that reality if you are trying to connect to me. You're willing to be connected to that reality without having to explain it to me. The last thing any person of color needs from somebody white is for them to be explaining their experience to them or how they're supposed to feel about it. And that happens more than you think. So if anybody that you know uses that I don't see color phrase, tell them you understand them trying to be progressive, but they don't need to say that because it communicates poorly. And the last word that I want to talk about before I stop so you can have a chance, I don't know what time it is even, okay, um, is beloved community. I am so tired. I am so tired of people smearing beloved community on everything, just like beloved community. We're the beloved community center. We're having the beloved community picnic next week. We're having the beloved community. We even used to call our commission, we used to call it dismantling racism, beloved community, creating the beloved community. I mean, really. Beloved community was, as a phrase, was used by some guy named Josiah Royce to talk about a community of white people that were superior to other people, and he wanted to call them a beloved community. That is the beginning of that word, and then that phrase, and then Dr. King cleaned it up and said, beloved community is a place where everybody has what they need. We are caring about people. We have a community we have a country where we are concerned about everybody having what they need to be who God put them on the earth to be. We would have equity. We would not have communities that had no grocery stores or bad schools. We would work to fix all of that. When most people talk about beloved community, that is not what they're thinking about. They're just thinking about, can we all be in the room together singing and acting happy? And we can't. And we're not. So I want us, all of us, to become more careful about the ways in which we use language around all of this. So if I talk about beloved community, then am I willing to work to deconstruct the racist supremacist, the white supremacist systems in America to create a world where equity can exist and equality and a chance for everybody to have the life they need in this country? Am I willing to do that? And if I'm not willing to do that, I need to quit talking about beloved community until I'm willing. It's like talking about reparations. You know, we want reparations, we just don't want anything to change. Can we fix it without change? If we can fix stuff without change, we'll be right there ready. Let's fix it. Let's talk, let's interrogate ourselves so that we are talking about what we are willing to live into. That we're talking about what we're willing to sacrifice for. That we're talking about what we are willing to really work to see happen. And not just window dressing. You know, a lot of these words have been used so that we don't have to really get down to the work. We can spend a long time talking about loving each other and not seeing color and racial reconciliation and building beloved community, and everything is still just the same. Basically, because at the core of ourselves, we are in no way ready for that change to come. And it's across the board. It doesn't really matter if you're white or brown or black. We all are challenged to get in the space where the language that we're using is really the language that represents the vision that we really have for ourselves and our culture. So then when you think about all this, where does that leave you? You know, what are you ready for? And when I read that First Corinthians 13 passage again, we've heard it so many times. It's almost like our names. We've heard it so many times. You just wake us up in the night and we can say it. When I sat with that and thought about it, I thought, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, how much work I have to do to get to be that person. To be that person, to be to be willing to love in general in the ways that love is being described there. What do the things I have to shed, and I have to start with asking God to give me purity of heart. Because my heart's got to get cleaned up. Our hearts have got to get in the game. It's not just about our heads. As a culture, as a collective, we keep on trying to put this Band-Aid on this big old cancer and hope that it'll just go away because we covered it up. And all of the time we're being asked to take off the Band-Aid and take a good look and see what's really here and call it by the right names. James Baldwin said that you can't heal everything you can name, but you won't heal anything that you don't name. So let's tell the truth to ourselves. You know, I laughingly said yesterday, I got a little list of folks that if I can get myself a spaceship that will go one way somewhere, I'm putting them on it. And they will be gone. And but I know that God is just looking at me going, get over it, because they're not going anywhere, and your job is to figure out how to be in some kind of communion with them, even though you really want them on a spaceship to be headed somewhere away from me. I don't care where they go, but away from me. And outer space might be far enough. I'm not totally sure, but at times. And all of us have got a list. I mean, there are people that just get on your last nerve and you want to do something with them. But really, there is one creator. At least I'm pretty convinced about that. And if you're not convinced about that, then that's a bigger question for you to get answered for yourselves. If there is one creator who has made everybody, then where does the second class citizenship fall? Because how would one creator create some people better than other people? What kind of creator would that be? And is that the God we believe in, or is there a God who really does love all of us equally? So then I have to get rid of my little spaceship list, because those folks happen to be created by the same creator that made me, and my job is to figure out how to see that creator in them and figure out what it is about them that's so challenging to me that I want to put them on a spaceship rather than to deal with them, because that's really always the right question. Why is this person bothering me so much? It's got something to do with what I need to be doing, working on, or else I wouldn't be bothered, right? So, and I know all of that. And sometimes I wish I didn't know any of it, and then I could just play unconscious and stay in my little, if I could just get rid of them, the world would be fine, which is where so many people live, in the realm of unconsciousness. And the first step to healing is waking up and naming, and being willing to acknowledge what you're naming as being real, and then to see what you can do about it. And some stuff we can do something about, some we can't, and we have to fall back upon grace and trust that at the end of the day, the God who created us loves us enough to say, you'll get another chance tomorrow to pay attention, to be more conscious. I think I want to stop right there and see what thoughts you might have, what questions, what got stirred up for you in thinking of this interrogation of these popular words that are just running all around in the racial healing conversations these days and making some of us crazy. So,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you, Dr. Meeks. And there's so much in there. I was thinking about, I felt my uncourageous life in the opening poem and my uncourageousness around tackling this issue.
Yeah.
For me, I'm scared of it sometimes. It was interesting what you were saying about healing for one is healing for all, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And something that really jumped out at me was like racial healing. Sometimes I think that's for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like racial healing is for people of color. It's not for me. But I really appreciate what you're saying about the fact that in America, white people are damaged by racism.
Right.
Our hearts are damaged by this fact.
Right.
And I really believe in what you said at the end, that you won't heal what you can't look at.
Right.
So that jumped out at me. In the middle, when you were talking about love, though, made me think of something in How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibrahim Kendi, where he
Mm-hmm.
was saying, I don't really want your kind of positive wishes. What policies are you going to pass that are going to change the world
Right.
and make a difference?
Yes.
And I wonder if there are any particular things you think people should do. You mentioned clean water. I need clean water. I need a grocery store.
Right.
What other things can we actually do?
Well, there's a lot. The healthcare, education, better policing. Um, we could do something about homelessness. We could fix homelessness in America if we ever decided we wanted to. And that
Right.
really does make me crazy. And a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with racism, just grounded in racism. The prison system stinks. and we could fix that too if we wanted to. I mean, other parts, other industrialized, civilized, trying to act civilized nations do so much better with their prison stuff than we do because we've got such a deep seated racist
Mm-hmm.
mentality about punishing, and we considered people of color to be the fodder for the prisons, and we could fix it. I mean, that's I always say there some of it we could fix by Monday. It's not. It's such a. It would the fix is not the issue. The will to fix it is the issue, and where do we find the will to
Yeah.
to 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 do any of this? But so I don't know. The list is, everybody can't be involved in everything, but you need whatever you pick is your whatever. It's not even what you pick; it's what you get called to. What you get called to is the thing you need to be really passionate about as you care about all
Mm-hmm.
the rest of it. I can't. I don't work. I visit somebody in prison who's got 3 life sentences and was on death row, so I know more about the prisons than I wish I knew. Um, I'm a retired college professor, so I know how pitiful we are at
Mm-hmm.
educating grades kindergarten through 12 in a lot of parts of our country. So there are just so many places
Mm-hmm.
where people can listen for the call
Yeah.
to go and do their part, and
Mm-hmm.
and and so and I just think that uh, we all need to be trying to do that as much as we can.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, I also love that you were just like slaying some words for us, kind of like knocking them down. I wonder if anybody here has any questions for Dr. Meeks. And Susan, would would you mind doing this bit? Thank you. And can I thank Susan and Kathy for helping organize this whole event and bringing it together and bringing Dr. Meeks to us? Who has a
Right
question?
here was right here.
Oh,
Bill.
Dr. Meeks, and I don't need the
I
mic.
know you don't.
You got a mic in your throat, right?
Uh, Bill, the one challenge is we've got some people watching at home, and if you don't have the mic, they can't hear you watching at home.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
I just had the tech booth at the back tugging their ears for me.
All right.
Yours.
Thank you. Thank you. When we're talking about racial healing, are we still nevertheless going to be acknowledging from us whites what harms we have done?
Of course. I mean, you have to pay attention to whatever needs to be healed. And if you have been a person who has had, attitudes toward people of color that need to be cleaned up, you got to work on that. And of course, the whole way this country has been constructed is based on favoring white over non-white. So why we have white supremacy. White skin's supreme. White skin is valued better and more. And as a white person, I'm guessing that you can take a step back and say, well, let me see, since I've got this privilege, let me see what I can do with bringing my brown and black brother with me and sister to share in the privilege that I have. I have a PhD. I'm the first person in my family to get a PhD. So my family has a PhD. So when somebody needs to hear doctor to get them to get off the dime to go do something, they call me and say, can you call and check on this for us? And so Dr. Meeks gets a little further down the road than Miss Meeks on welfare. So my sister has a PhD. She has access to my privilege because I had the privilege to go to Emory University and get a PhD. Now I can sit and lament about that and have survivor's guilt or whatever that foolishness is that white folks like to have about their privilege. I'm just so hated that I've got white skin and privilege. So do you plan to die and come back green? No, you're here. You are here with your white skin and your white privilege. So what now will you do with that? So then open the door for somebody who can't open the door as easily as you can. That's one way to atone for living in a world of privilege and benefiting from it. And every time we talk about this, we always get folks saying, well, I don't have any privilege because I grew up in Appalachia and we didn't have a toilet and we were so poor. You have white skin in America. It doesn't matter where you grew up. It doesn't matter how bad it was. When you got through suffering your early childhood and early whatever and escaped that arena, you took your white skin into a world that says you're better than the person over here whose skin is not white. And you need to be awake to that and willing to do something with that if you want to try to be a well person rather than saying, well, I'm here because I deserve it, because I worked hard. And if you worked this hard, you could be white too, is basically what we're saying. And that's not true. You can, people of color work sometimes twice as, 3 times, 4 times as hard as white people and didn't get nearly as far because they had to overcome being a person of color, and just acknowledging that and living into the truth of that and sharing that is are some of the ways that I think healing happens, so that because guilt doesn't help anybody. Guilt is such a, if you have to feel guilty for a minute, but try to get over it as quickly as you can, because it's good energy going awry, because it doesn't help you and it certainly doesn't help anybody else. So, I don't want any white folks to be feeling guilty. I mean, you're white. What are you going to do about it? I'm black. What am I going to do about it? I mean, we've got bleaching cream and you go try to get tan, but we're still black and white at the end of the day, So I just think we need to own who we are, live into it, and then use it. Be a tool in God's hands. I've got privileges as a black woman with a PhD from Emory that my sister, who only graduated from high school and lives on disability, does not have. And there's no debate about that. There's no changing it. There's nothing. And my feeling guilty about it is ridiculous, because it helps nobody. But if I get my act together and say, well, I'm going to use this, I'm going to be this empowered person, and I'm going to use it for my own benefit, and I'm going to use it for the benefit of anybody that I can use it for. And I think if white people would do more of that, this country would get better. Instead of sitting around lamenting, because you're going to still be white at the end of the lament.
Any other questions? Anybody over here? Oh, wait, there's... Okay.
Hello, Dr. Meeks. The question that I have is, it's really easy as a white person to just rest.
Yeah.
Could you speak to maybe how we persevere in this work when you've got that ability, because I'm white, to just rest and not work at this?
I think a lot of it has to do with how well do you want to be. I think the white person who thinks that they have the ability, they have the invitation to rest, has not understood their level of wounding. That when you begin to understand how racism has wounded you, then it's about your healing too. And I think that the notion that you can rest comes out of your thinking, you didn't get wounded. It's the work you're doing for somebody over there, not for yourself. But if you understand that racism has wounded everybody, and most white folks don't get that. Right. Wendell Berry's book, The Hidden Wound, is a good book to read for white people to begin to understand better that racism has wounded everybody. So you're working to get well too. But as long as you think you're helping somebody else get well, you can take a break when you feel like it. But if you're trying to get well yourself, you might be a little less willing to take a break. And for people of color, the same thing is true. I mean, we have to work to survive, and we have to work to get well, and we get tired too. We don't really want to be, I was daydreaming the other day about just being somewhere, not thinking about any of this stuff. And I thought, are you kidding? You wouldn't be there but 5 minutes before you were looking around and seeing what was wrong wherever you were. So you might as well stay where you are. But we all get tired. I mean, it's human to get tired. And then we get up and go again. That is the call. Jesus went off and rested, and then Jesus came back and worked. So yeah, you are right though, that it does feel like it's an option. It's not an option. The country, the planet, is not going to continue to bear the burden of the way in which we have separated ourselves. Look at us. I mean, we messed up a whole lot of things, and this way of not caring about each other is impacting a lot of stuff. And we're not going to be able to. I don't think we're going to be able to continue in the future as long as we have in the past without doing better with this piece of healing. To be quite frank, I don't want to be this. I don't like doomsday kind of talk, but I think this is just a reality that the planet's just not going to bear that negative energy without us doing better with bringing it to the light.
I I am honored to meet you, and I say that from the bottom of my heart. I am struggling with what community means. I'm finding in my long history in the church that the community is out there. The community is that person that I stepped over on the street last Sunday on my way to get brunch. My community is the mother of a prisoner in Folsom Prison who hasn't seen her son in 23 years. But we formed a relationship over the phone. My community is out there. It has always been in here. And I'm wondering, when you're talking about building relationships, well, a one-on-one relationship means something. It not only for this person, this poor down and out person, I'm getting as much from that relationship, maybe even more. I'm getting more from a relationship when I get on a shuttle bus to visit someone and there are no seats left. And this young black woman stood up from her seat and insisted that I sit down. And I said, kind of flippantly, well, there are some perks to being old. And she took me by my shoulders and looked at me straight in the eyes and said, oh, honey, you're not old, you're blessed. And that has stayed with me. That has stayed with me. That happened about 3 years ago. So I'm curious about this building relationships, if you have any more thoughts on when we build relationships, I'm finding it's these one-on-one. It's these one-on-one that we think, well, you know, big deal. It is a big deal. You're not only giving, but you're receiving.
Right. Yeah, I think community is a bit more than those kinds of. I mean, the some of those things are encounters that you've described, and then relationships for me have some longevity, have some um, sharing back and forth. We get to know each other. You know, I think that part of our problem within the Episcopal Church is that we sit in our buildings, in our pews, and we don't know who's in the building with us, period, no matter what color they happen to be. So we've got a lot of work to do, I think, just in that regard in the first place. And maybe race is just one of the ways that has gotten kind of inserted in that piece to make us at least even start realizing that we don't know each other. I think relationship is about getting to know somebody and to walk with them. Tomorrow I'm going to do a couple of the meditations from my book, and it's one of them is on being a fellow pilgrim. For me, a relationship is like a fellow pilgrimage that you're willing to take off your shoes and walk a few miles in my shoes. Then you get to see what my life is like. You get to share in my struggles. You get to know what some of the pain is like, and you don't run from it. I mean, and you don't try to fix it, and you don't try to talk me out of it or edit it. Is I guess what I always say. You know, you just are willing to say, a person is just willing to say, just let me see what it's like. And then you just walk, you know. And I've got one or two friends like that. For the most part, if people aren't willing to kind of be with me where I am, then they can't be with me. Period. Because I don't have time to pretend to be somewhere else and don't intend to pretend. And if it's too painful, then it's too painful. You need to just keep on going. That's really okay. I don't have any hard feelings about it at all. But but for me, it's about some depth. And I think we're so into microwave culture and everything's got to happen in the next 30 seconds or it's not worth paying attention to until we missed a lot of what it really means to be in relationship and to hear people and to if what would it be like on Sunday morning if we could just all come into the building and be where we really are and have folks just put their arms around us and say, we're glad to see you in any kind of shape you happen to show up here. You don't have to try to come and act like you got it together because nobody else has got it together. We're just all pretending here. You know, Henry Nouwen says we're all looking for the bandage closets. We're wounded healers looking for the bandage closets. But we act like we made the bandages. And we're looking for, And I think that God is waiting on us to just come limping in the way we really feel. Just limp on in here and bring your wounded self because somebody sitting beside you found a bandage they might tell you about, and you get to go wrap that on you, and you'll be a little better off later. But that's what we do, is it? We've got to, I'm okay, I'm fine. And you're just so not fine. Just so not fine. And I was somewhere doing a workshop that actually was a predominantly white church that had a couple of members that were African American. So they kept talking about they needed to go somewhere and make friends with folks that were African American. And I kept thinking, well, don't you have some members? And And they had these people been there 30 years, and they're thinking in order to find out what African Americans thinking, they need to go somewhere and find some African Americans. And I'm thinking, well, why am I talking to, did it ever occur to you that maybe you should talk to your members that are African American? But they've been so busy being polite, around the coffee pot for 30 years. And so they don't even know how to have a real conversation about what folks, because we're so scared folks are going to be angry or people are going to say something that we don't know what to do about. Well, just you don't know what to do. And just say, I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that I can listen to you. I can listen to you. I can let you be where you are. And I'm willing to walk alongside you and be with you in this. I can't fix it, but I can help you bear it. And that's true across race, across gender, across economic status, across everything. We can do that. And that's what God expects us to do. And if we do that, we will heal the racial divide if we do that. But, we got to make up our minds.
Thank you. We do. We do.
Yeah.
We're drawing to a close. Oh, no, Nafisa.
What time
Go
is
ahead.
it?
Can we do one more question?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Can it-
I've been resting all day, so I'm
It's not
here.
on?
Is it on?
Nafisa. No? It's on.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's on. Okay,
It's on.
good. Yeah. Yay. Hi, everybody. Dr. Meeks, thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm just thrilled to be here. I came specifically tonight because I really wanted to ask you this question. And the work that you do, the work that many others do in the area, I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And you've been doing this a long time. And I know with the onset of the pandemic in 2020 and the unfortunate death of George Floyd, many people began to understand some things that they had not perhaps understood quite very well before. And you were doing this work well before that unfortunate death occurred. Do you see any difference in people having had awareness before that, and then after that, is there a difference in the awareness in how people are embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion at this point in time in our country?
Yeah. Well, one thing has happened is that I don't have any white people talking to me about why are we talking about race. That question has ceased to be asked. I think that folks get that something's wrong and we've got to be in this conversation. So that has happened. But a lot of what we do as Americans is so knee-jerky. We just love to respond to the last tragedy, and then when it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and that's what we've done with a lot of this, and that's disturbing, particularly around reimagining policing and public safety. We've just put that back under the cover now because 1,067 young black and brown people have been murdered by police since George Floyd. Can you tell me the names of any of them? Because they barely made the news. So we like to live from crisis to crises, and we do crisis stuff, and then we go back to, undercover or whatever. So when people called me in 2020 in a panic about what are we going to do, I said, what the native people say, what you do when you're lost in the forest, you stand still. Stand still and listen to see what you need to do so that you don't be one of those folks that's running out with this knee-jerk, I gotta go do something, and be burnt out in 30 minutes and back in your house under the bed. You need to listen to see what your heart compels you to do. And I'm still saying that because if you don't get your heart in the game, you're not going to stay in it because your head's going to get you out of it. It'll talk you out of it. It'll convince you that you've done enough, or you're too tired, or you're too busy, or you're too something or another. So I'm preoccupied with people listening to themselves, waking up enough to hear the conversation within themselves, and then listening to see what they need to do. And I'm very suspicious of anything that implies that you can do this quickly. This work is for your lifetime. It is a part of spiritual formation for people of faith to work on dismantling any structures that stand between human beings and being who God put them on the earth to be. So you don't get done. So that needs to get off the list of finishing. You just forget it. It's not, you don't get finished. You just get, I've been doing this work for 50 years. I'm 76 years old. I expect that I will do this work till I die, because that it's not, in the first place, not going to be finished then. And in the second place, there is always going to be some more healing that needs to happen for me and in this world. So if we stop worrying about getting finished or getting enough, if we quit being good capitalists, I've invested enough, where's my return? And we think the return ought to be that we're done, that's not how this works. It is about every day getting up and being focused to what you have been called to do, not what I have been called to do or your neighbor, but to what you have been called to do. Staying focused and staying faithful. As you do with reading the Bible, paying your pledge, showing up for services, all the other things that we have been taught we need to do to be Christian, this is a part of it. It's the same thing. Yeah. And that's the problem, people, some of my friends that are priests have had to worry about even having conversations about race in Episcopal churches because parishioners think it's social justice stuff, and they don't want to talk about social justice. They want to talk about Christianity. Now, they didn't ever read the New Testament carefully, because if you read the New Testament carefully, you know that's a very false division to be trying to make. And talking about creating a world where every one of God's children can live the way they were put on, live into who God put them on the earth to be, that's what the journey of faith is about. So if you miss that, you need to go back and reread the New Testament. And that's what I've been telling my priest friends. Don't get in an argument, just give people the New Testament and tell them to go sit with it for about a year and come back and see what they think. Because Jesus will clear it up for you. Mm-hmm. That you don't have a choice about getting well if you really want to be on this journey. And if you really want to get well, you don't get to have some people who are better than other people. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that message I don't think George Floyd and the pandemic got us to understand that any better than we did before, because so many folks think we're just going to get back to normal, whatever normal is, and which means you can go back into your little corner and be comfortable, that we got pushed out of because we needed to be made uncomfortable to take a look at some things we need to be doing. So why do I was talking to a bunch of really, really smart sixth graders. I mean, gosh, that's a scary little group of folks, because they're just amazing. And this little thing about this big said to me, So I just want to ask you, what makes you keep getting up in the mornings? And I thought, who told you to ask me that question? But you know, he it was such a good question. And what makes me keep getting up in the mornings is I am trying to be true to God's call on my life. And I am going to be focused and I'm going to be as faithful as I can be. And I have no kind of illusions about ending systemic racism in this world. But I will work every day as if I believe my work is going to fix it. Because I am going to be focused and faithful. And that's what I get up to be in the mornings. Otherwise, it's a lost cause. And I've got activist friends that are very bitter because they thought that their activism was going to do the trick. And they invested in it. And it was, the stuff got worse instead of better. Because sometimes you look at us and you think, oh my God, are we going backwards? Do we understand what we're doing? I don't know if we're going backwards or forward, and I mostly don't worry about it because the work is there and my call is to do it. And when it's done, I think I'll probably figure that out. You know, oh yeah, racism is gone, you can quit. But it didn't go anywhere yet, right? So I don't have to quit yet, right? Because it didn't go anywhere. So, but your focus has got to be right, and your understanding of what you're doing, or else you're just leading yourself into a place to be in great despair. And I think right now, you know, I hear so much despair and fear and worry from people who have faith. And I want to say, well, like Sojourner Truth said to Frederick Douglass when Frederick Douglass was up in the pulpit preaching about how bad everything was, and Sojourner Truth was way in the back of the church, and she just stood up and said, hey, Frederick, is God dead? Because if God's not dead, all that stuff you're talking about can be fixed. So I say to you, you know, if you're teetering on despair, you might need to ask yourself if God is alive or dead for you, because God is gonna be there, and so is racism, so is brokenness. But we've got to do our job as if we believe that tomorrow it'll all be better. My mama used to say, tomorrow's another day. You get up and you know, we were black and poor in Arkansas. Tomorrow's another day. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And we kept getting up, and I'm going to keep on getting up until, what's the old spiritual say, you know, one of these days is going to be a great getting up morning because Jesus will be there, you know. And I'm not even thinking much about that. I'm just thinking about give me the grace to be faithful today. And today I was faithful to myself. I just hung out with myself. These lovely people, Kathy and Dean Matthews and Susan gave me the permission to rest. Revolutionary to rest. Rest is an act of resistance to capitalism that says you can't rest because you got to get a little more done. You got to get a little further ahead, so don't stop. And my soul says, oh, but I got to rest. And they said, yeah, go rest. And so, yeah, tomorrow I work harder because I rested today. But I want to rest some more because it's part of the way to be a good revolutionary. Take care of yourself. Because if you don't, you're not doing anything anyway, but living in an illusion. So it's probably past 8 o'clock. I don't know.
It's a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah, okay.
We're good.
Well, I don't know about you all, but, you know, I love being with you, and I'm so grateful for your your attentive hearts and heads, and I hope and pray that you will find the grace, as David White would say, to be a half a shade braver every day in whatever it is you're doing, and that you will challenge yourself and interrogate yourself, that you'll be a half a shade braver every day in that whole process. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Meeks on your behalf for coming all this way, speaking to us, spending the weekend with us. Tomorrow morning, we have a workshop from 10 till noon. You can still sign up by using the QR code on here. It'd be lovely to know how many people are coming so we can put the right number of chairs out. So please come along in the morning if you can. If you can make a donation towards the weekend's expenses, that will also be great. And you can use the QR code for that. I'll leave something at the door. On Sunday morning, Dr. Meeks is preaching for us at the 11 o'clock service. And we have book signing at 10 before that service. I do want to say just one reflection, or a little reflection of mine. I feel slightly convicted. And we've been doing a series around race from September through October here at the cathedral, and we started calling it, or I started calling it, racial reconciliation.
Yeah.
So I'm got to learn not to do that. And I appreciate hearing your interpretation about racial healing. But one of the things that I think is that we've had this series, we've been doing Sacred Ground, we've been doing a land acknowledgement, we've been thinking about race. We could think that we should pat ourselves on the back and be done.
Yeah.
And actually, I made a mistake the other day. I was talking to somebody and I said, Dr. Meeks will be bringing that period of our thinking to an end to someone. And they said, no, we're not bringing that to an end because that looks tokenistic. That is us just patting ourselves on the back and saying, we did that, now we can move on. What I hear you saying is that this is work.
Yeah.
Love is work. Takes time, takes commitment. And the healing that we are engaged in is healing for the world, and that's healing for me. And I need that healing. I need that. So thank you for leading us through all of this. I do want to say thank you to Ken and Kathy Hopner and Susan Oh, they're both just gone. They're going into the hall. Susan Hotchkiss for helping coordinate this weekend and for organizing the event and for hosting Dr. Meeks. Kenny and Joanne in the back on the tech booth, thank you for beaming this out to the world and recording it for us so we can come back and watch it later. Kathy Twibell put some flowers together for us here in the hall, so thank you to her. And thank you to you, once again, for your wisdom and for your guidance and for what you've shared with us. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. It is not that simple to bring myself from Atlanta to Sacramento in a day and then be ready to work, but I am so grateful. Your attentiveness makes it worthwhile. Thank you for it. And your work here makes it worthwhile, because everywhere I see people engaging this work gives me hope. Yeah. There are more good people on this planet than not, and I will never stop believing that. And you affirm that for me, so thank you.
Thanks.